Hi guys, this is Mackie from Warrior Pilgrim, and today I've got a selection of weapons out to talk to you about something in particular that many people might question. It's about relevant techniques across the board. One in particular I'm talking about, with regards to these weapons, is spinning. Now I know there are several channels all about swordsmanship and weaponry. They've already talked about spinning attacks, that's full body spins to attack. I'm just going to say, as far as I'm concerned, spinning attacks, you're exposing your back. That's all that you need to know. The moment you expose your back to the enemy, you're in big trouble. But spinning as a technique with your weapon, that is something different. It comes in all manner of terms: flourishing, flowering, moulinese, and so forth. But they all turn up in different fighting systems. Why? Well, many people might think when that crops up, you're thinking of lightsabers. And true, the classic idea of a spinning blade is lightsabers. I did some spinning practice once, and someone said, hey look, it's a Jedi. And yes, this sort of spinning is useless. Not only is it incredibly weak, you're also leaving a big gap through which someone can easily thrust at you. Good with a reverse grip? Maybe. Again, you're still left with a big gap. And in this position, you're much harder to control your weapon. Particularly a big thing like this that has most of its weight on the handle, you don't really get much benefit from it. What about a staff weapon? For that, I'm going to demonstrate with this. What about the cycling of a weapon from side to side to cover all the angles? As many people point out, however, that'll just get it tied up. Therefore, double-blade staff swords or double-blade lightsabers won't work, according to that logic. However, I did a bit of research and he delved into it and found that, for the most part, any footage showing wielders of double-blade lightsabers, I'm going to use this to demonstrate, don't tend to use it in a flourishing motion. More often than not, it's either broad, sweeping movements, or, more often, short, hard strikes from the left, the right, the left, the right, all coming explosively. And if you bear in mind, that's actually fairly intuitive if you got it in, well, I think with the motorcycle grip. You're simply extending from your body in a punch, letting the weight of the weapon do the rest, and you're carving through someone with essentially a punching action. Turns that into a push and a pull motion, and you've got a full movement just in that simple push with the left, pull with the right, and it works out within a reasonable span. And others even use what we might call the standard grip, which is more like a spear. And yes, you can still do the right, left, right, left, right. And you can throw it from all angles as well, while still able to handle it in the point for thrusting. So this technique works. Twirling, however, doesn't. And that rarely appears. More than not, it seems to be wide flourishing motions, either to set up the weapon, to show skill, or more often, in the case of Darth Maul, the classic one, simply twirling it around to get it ready for his next attack. Simply keeping it in front of him whilst he spins it. So, the stereotypical uses of the twirling motion don't actually work and are rarely used. What about with swords? as I mentioned, there are several sorts of attacks. But does that mean that it's completely useless and it's pointless and just Hollywood fancy? Oh no, it does actually appear in several different styles. You'll find it in all training programs for staves, for swords, for axes, and even some pole arms. Why? Well, it depends on the situation. So we'll start with the staffs. This time I'm going to use my carrying wood staff. Twirling a staff, you might think you're talking about the classic spins. Some people might even call it an orbit, as in called something like that in lightsaber duels. But no, what this is a simple spin. Why are they going to use these techniques? Does it actually mean anything in actual combat? Not really. But what it does is give you a feel for the weapon and builds up the strength in your hands, in your wrists, in your arms, in your shoulders. It is an exercise, not necessarily a fighting technique. Not every single technique that you'll learn is all about killing the other person. It's not all about defending yourself from being killed. Sometimes it's just familiarising yourself with your weapon and building up your strength. You're doing this flow. If you do this enough times, you'll learn how to move your staff, you'll learn how to grip your staff, and you'll learn how to move with it. It gives you a better idea of the weight. You'll find that also in sword fighting techniques, in what are known as flow drills. You pretty much start doing cuts. You throw the cuts, and you can see I'm simply changing the angle so I can control where the blade goes. It teaches you edge alignment in smooth patterns. Are these going to be effective techniques in fighting? Unlikely. But just because you're not going to be throwing all these cuts at an opponent because they'll see it coming all the time, doesn't mean it's a useful technique and should be thrown out. No. It's simply something to train you, to test you, to exercise you, to keep you moving. It also gives you an idea of what your weapon is like. It gives you an idea of the weight of your weapon, the balance of the weapon. You'll find in some martial arts and in some weapons testers, some movies even, when testing your weapon, they do not only the classic test of where the balance is, but also do a couple of swings. Not necessarily swings that will tell them what the edge is like. They will tell them the feel of the weapon, the grip of the weapon, the weight of the weapon. So they can use it, control it, and have a better idea of how it flows. Strangely enough, this is not something forgotten about by some scientists. Neil deGrasse Tyson was once interviewed, and they noticed that he didn't have a phone case. And during the interview, he was twirling his phone around in his hands. I'm not very good, though. My dexterity is terrible. But he said that if he's got a phone in his hand, he doesn't want to drop it. So, if he can twirl it in his hand like that, then it is the phone for him. His example of how that's relevant is when people twirl their guns. That is a completely useless technique. You can't shoot multiple people like that, twirling your gun around your head, no. it's not going to work. What that does is familiarise yourself with how the gun moves in your hand. If you can do fancy techniques with something, and it's not going to fall out of your hand, then you're definitely not going to fall out of your hand in combat. But you're doing much simpler ones. So, for the most part, it's a training technique. It's not about using those techniques in battle. It's a technique to teach you how to move with your weapon. The only exception to that is where it does apply in battle. But more often than not, it's with much bigger weapons. Weapons, as I said, like great swords, like spears, like swords, and polearms. We're going to use this as an example. This can be used like a spear in a thrusting manner, but with such a big blade, it is far more likely to be used in a broad, sweeping movement like this. I've never been trained in greatsword, and this is a very, very loose handle, so I'm not going to be waving my blade around too much. But it is just that sort of technique that are used to wave around in a wide, sweeping arc. You'll find that in Scottish quarterstaff, you'll find that in claymore, greatswords, badone, montante. Name the type of greatsword, you'll see the techniques. The majority of them are wide, swinging movements that cover a wide area to keep multiple people at bay. You may say, surely one person can stop a sword like that and you'll be perfectly fine, everyone else can pile in. Who's going to want to go anywhere near a blade, nearly as long as you are, swinging around at high speed? Unlikely it's going to be you. And if it's not going to be you, who else is it going to be? Not likely to be them. Okay? Not me, not me, not me. But I've got to do something. That's the effectiveness of those weapons. Staves are the same. You can swing them around in wide arcs. You can use it to clear a room, assuming you don't catch yourself. I don't really have no room in here to practice out with this. Let's see, it's just slightly shorter than I am, around about my chin. So I can use it to clear a good long area. If I hold it like this, for example, this is only about 5 feet, give or take. 5 foot 5. That's a fair distance, just like this. If I try extending it fully, if I go even one-handed, that is a good 6 or 7 feet. It's out of camera range, I know that. So, if I use those techniques, that's about 6 or 7 feet of clearance around me. No one's going to want to come near me. Because if they step into this arc, it's going to hurt. Might be a particularly heavy stick, but it's a stick nevertheless. There are also techniques with single-handed swords, as demonstrated here by Robinson Swords. He does a fantastic series of videos on swordsmanship. I definitely recommend checking them out. But as you can see, he's including various techniques involving the wheeling action of the single-handed sword. He also has a similar one on longsword and occasionally on spears as well, so it shows that it can be used in several combat situations. And that is the point. All those techniques apply in those areas. Some as training tools, some as semi-effective techniques in battle. What does that have to do with religion? I always bring it back to religion. It's more to do with the arguments. Some arguments, if you take them into certain situations, matter not. Because they just don't work. The idea of context is one of them. Sometimes it works very well, other times not. It entirely depends on how you use it. Sometimes, think of the context is useful to understand the entire thing. Sometimes context is the devil's argument. one that will cut to the core. But it's all about how you use it and when. Just because it works well in one situation does not mean it will work everywhere else. I'm sure there are lots of other things, but right now, I can't think of them on the top of my head. If we can come up with them, I'll do it in the editing room. But until then, thanks for watching, stay safe, and God be with you, my friends.